Namaste, everyone. Welcome to our virtual talk this evening entitled Dharmic Approaches to Self-Care. My name is Vineet Chander, and I serve as an assistant dean in the Office of Religious Life at Princeton University, as well as a Hindu chaplain on campus. And the Hindu Life program at Princeton is so delighted to be one of the sponsors of this talk. I'm also joined this evening by my dear colleague and spiritual sister, Dr. Asha Shipman, who is the director of Hindu Life at Yale University. And Hindu Life at Yale is also co-sponsoring this talk, along with our friends from Dharma into Action. This evening's talk is entitled, as I said, Dharmic Approaches to Self-Care. And as we'll hear about a little bit this evening, self-care is a phrase probably that is familiar to everyone on this Zoom call, as well as listening along on the YouTube video that we are live streaming. It's kind of hard to get away from the term self-care in one sense. It's so much seeped into, and some might even argue, has really reached a saturation point in the kind of pop culture vocabulary. And yet, it's far more difficult to actually define self-care on a deeper level. And so we're so excited about this talk this evening to really be able to do a deep dive, drawing from ancient teachings, from Dharmic traditions, but also from contemporary approaches to psychology and clinical social work and caregiving. And we couldn't have asked for a better guide to lead us through this exploration than our guest speaker this evening. We're so honored to have with us Dr. Aparna Ramaswamy. Dr. Ramaswamy, or Aparna-ji, has both an EDD and a PhD and is a licensed clinical professional counselor and clinical supervisor in the state of Maryland and in the District of Columbia. She is a graduate from Johns Hopkins with a master's in clinical counseling, and she also completed her EDD in counselor education and supervision at the University of the Cumberlands. In addition, Aparna-ji holds a PhD in transformative studies from California Institute of Integral Studies. She offers individual, family, and group counseling in Maryland and Washington, D.C. She also provides clinical supervision for counseling students and graduate professionals working towards their licensure in clinical counseling. So she is not only a counselor, not only a teacher, but she is a teacher of teachers, a teacher to future counselors. Aparna-ji's research focus is on cultivating multicultural counseling competence using meditation and mindfulness training. At Johns Hopkins University, she taught several core counseling courses and introduced electives such as integrating alternative approaches to mental wellness and meditation and mindfulness in counseling. She is now a faculty member at Saybrook College. Aparna-ji serves as LCPC on the Maryland State Board of Professional Counselors and is a strong advocate for multicultural competence in counseling and supervision, and is part of a supervisory interest network in the Association for Counselor Education and Supervision and American Counseling Association. She is a lifetime member of the Maryland Counseling Association and a collaborative presenter on multicultural counseling competence at regional and national presentations. Aparna-ji is also the founding director of the Dhiya Foundation, or Dharma into Action. And as I said, we're so grateful for Dhiya's partnership and support and collaboration to make this evening's talk possible. Finally, I'll add on a personal note, Aparna-ji, Dr. Ramaswamy, is one of the most inspiring figures that I've come across in my own work as a pastoral counselor and caregiver and chaplain. And in some ways, Aparna-ji is actually a colleague, I should say, a counselor as well, but a colleague to Dr. Shipman and myself, because most recently, she also served as an interim chaplain at Georgetown University, where she oversaw care for the Dharmic communities. We are so blessed, so grateful, and so honored to have Aparnaji with us. We're going to ask that she share her presentation with us. So I'm going to turn it over to her. She will present to us for about 45 or 50 minutes, and then we will open it up for question and answer and comments. Please do share any questions you might have in the chat box. You can chat generally in the chat box or chat me directly, and we'll be sure to get as many questions to Aparnaji as possible. Please join me in giving a very warm Princeton University as well as Yale University welcome to our very special guest, Dr. Aparna Ramaswamy.
Thank you so much, Viniji. It's such a pleasure. And the most awkward thing is hearing yourself being announced and you're thinking, really, I am this, I am that. But I enter every interaction, I remind myself to stay a student. And what I mean in the context of today's presentation is this is a topic that I'm no expert in. We're all lived experts, living experts on how do we live so that we have less suffering, more comfort, more liberation. But the actual presentation, the messaging this is my first time. So help me refine it. Tell me what works, tell me what doesn't work. So together we can create and pioneer a new kind of self-care protocol, if you will, from Dharmic approaches. I'm going to share my presentation a little bit, and then I don't want to get too talky, so I'll get off it in a little bit so I can talk with y'all a little bit. So this is the title we came up to. Dharmic approaches to self-care. So we have so many words there. What does self-care mean? What exactly do we mean by dharmic approaches? What aspect of Dharma are we talking about? What is the relevance of social, relational, spiritual? So we have a lot to unpack in a little time. So if you go on to SAMHSA, which is a Spiritual and Mental Health Substance Abuse Administration, you'll see these wellness models, and you'll see many more of these wellness wheels. So we're going to talk a little bit about the buzzword of self-care, which has become a little bit performative. What are we going to do? Am I going to do meditation? Am I going to go walk? Am I going to go for a mani-pedi in the beauty spa? What am I going to do in order to take care of my physical self? So it becomes a performance of activities. And that's okay. But is that all it is? We want to talk a little bit about that. And then start sharing, what do our dharmic traditions, what are the perspectives that offers on the concept of self? And more important, self-care. You'll notice one self is uppercase S and one is lowercase. We, depending on the tradition you believe in, will align with usually the lowercase self. Talk about what social wellness is, religious, spiritual, and hopefully try to come together with how can we carry these concepts forward in our life. So when you look at this colorful picture, this one says 8 dimensions. I've seen many with 6, some with 4. I think they cover a lot of it. Now, for some of you, you may say that, well, physical, I got it covered. I'm not yet into environmental. I'm okay financial. So we kind of cherry pick. We try to identify which is the one that we want to work on the most, usually reflecting which is the one that is a little out of balance maybe. But you see, our traditions are very clear. You can't just do one or the other. You have to understand that we are all of it. Now, while SAMHSA has come up with this dimension in the last maybe a few decades, we have something several centuries ago, the Taittiriya Upanishad, maybe even thousands of years, which talks about the various concepts of self. What are our selves, if you will? It's also called the koshas. Of course, the most external is the physical body. We usually have a couple of arms, couple of legs, depends on our abilities and disabilities. We have a physical body. And underneath that or within that, this is not necessarily sequentially done, but it's more integrated. We have a pranamaya kosha, the energy body. The manomaya kosha, the emotional, what we feel, the realm of psychology and counseling. Vijnanamaya kosha, the wisdom body. You see, they separate wisdom from intellect or energy. And then the anandamaya kosha, the bliss body. Now, this colorful image is not obviously thousands of years old, but the concept is hundreds, if not thousands of years old, the Taittiriya Upanishad. How do you take care of each one of these cells? And more important, why? Why do you have to take care? Let's answer the first. So it says that, of course, the physical body, the Annamaya Kosha, is sustained by food, nutrition, all that you put in, whether it's good and bad. We now live in the time of abusive behaviors that we all sometimes can be tempted to practice. What do we put into our body? Does it really help our body run well? Does it actually end up causing more problems in our physical body? What can we do in order to provide nutrition in a judicious and balanced way to sustain our external physical body? That's one aspect of self-care. The other aspect is, how do you sustain the pranamaya kosha? The pranamaya kosha is the energy, you'll see the name in the pranayama, the vital force. How do you sustain it? One of the practices they talk about is breath work, breathing exercises, among others. The manomaya kosha, which is the mind, vijnanamaya, ananda, that's where you go more into the spiritual aspect. When you come into the mind, and the mind is where a little bit of the emotionality comes in, where you have relationships, social aspects of it, and of course your physical. So this is kind of how the Dharmic approach interfaces with mental health approach. While we don't necessarily have the 8 dimensions, one could easily extrapolate and say, we can see how that works here. And bear in mind the time that's elapsed between the Taittiriya Upanishad and modern interpretations of wellness. So this is kind of how we approach self-care. It's perhaps not advisable to approach it in a fragmented way and say that I'm going to take care of my physical body. I'm going to make sure I eat nutritious food. I'm going to make sure I don't put any abusive elements into my body. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to sleep, all of which you have to do. But it addresses one aspect of you. And unless you address more than one aspect of you, the balance and true self-care does not emerge. So says the Taittiriya Upanishad. So why? The second question. Why do we have to practice self-care? Why do we have to address all these various koshas? So what? Why can't I just practice my physical level and call it a day? Why can't I just deal with my wisdom and call it a day? You see, because our Dharma also tells us the purpose of life, the 4 aims of life, the purusharthas, ayo artha kama dharma moksha. What do these words really refer to? Artha is, you see some in complete translations that talk about purpose. Artha is all the materialistic values, accomplishments we have in life, the career we have, the education we have, the house we live in, everything, possession, all the materialism is artha. And that is one of the aims. There's nothing bad about it. That's one of the aims in life, to acquire judiciously and appropriately. Second, kama, your desire, your passion, feed it. So you can go and accomplish what you and only you can accomplish, even if it is the pursuit of materialistic things. Nothing wrong with that. But you see, if you do only 2 of that, it's kind of like sitting on a chair with 2 legs. It kind of wobbles a little. It's unstable. You can run into a lot of problems. The other 2 legs, the dharma and moksha. As you pursue everything that you desire in life, everything that you're passionate about in life, go for it, work for it, acquire it. Remember to follow guidance of Dharma. What does that mean? Dharma is different for different stations in life. My Dharma as a woman may be very different from my husband's Dharma as a father. My Dharma as a teacher may be very different from your Dharma as a student. There are various roles, if you will, in life. Kula Dharma, Raja Dharma, Swadharma, Sadharana Dharma. But all of these dharmas have a few things in common. They're usually values and virtues that are not bound by only serving you, but they also serve others beyond you. And I don't mean just your family and friends, but people you don't know, the larger community. It's a very simplistic way to understand Dharma. I understand it. That it's far more than that, but for our purposes, that if ever in your pursuit of all that you are doing, your knowledge, your work, you are able to turn it outward. So your knowledge serves others beyond you. Your intelligence, let's say you're in the medical profession, you're a brilliant doctor, it serves others beyond you. So even as you pursue all that you want to pursue in life, remember for it to serve other people too, is usually a good way to remember that. And ultimately, we do all of this because of our spiritual wellness. Moksha. We come from traditions that are looking at how do we not stay bound in the sufferings of human birth and death. And we'll get to it as we move forward. With me so far? Here is where I'd like to kind of turn it open to you. So as we look at this slide, I invite you, if you feel comfortable, turn on your microphones, videos, talk. If not, just chat in the window. We don't need stress. Without stress, we can very easily just default to being couch potatoes. A certain amount of stress is good. Like knowing there's an exam down a corner, knowing there's a project, knowing there's a project we have to complete, a flight we have to make, deadlines. That's okay. Those are positive stresses that bring out a response in you that are productive and effective. It becomes a problem when it starts getting more and more toxic. That is where stress self-care comes in. We are not able to always manage external pressure and stress, and that causes internal stress. So there are two concepts here. There is the externality of life that pushes into us. And then there's an internal pressure that we put on ourselves that makes the navigation of the external stressors really hard. We get scared. Do I have what it takes in me to meet that challenge? Can I truly perform? Can I overcome that challenge? We start worrying. What if I can't? What if I fail? Will I look like a fool? Will people make fun of me? What would I look like? That's internal. That's not external. We start getting anxious and nervous. If I don't pass this class, if I don't get a good GPA, would I be able to graduate college? Would I be able to get a job? What if I become destitute? What if I never leave my parents' house? What if I lose my job? What if I can't take care of my family? All of that is our internal stress. And then what happens is we build on that stress to the point where it's no longer positive for us. A little bit of anxiety is okay. Some amount of fear is healthy. Sometimes pushing yourself a little bit so you get exhausted is okay. You replenish. But when we start getting distressed about our stress, we start getting anxious about our anxiety, we get depressed about our depression, we start getting into the toxic realm. So this is an important concept for us to kind of absorb. There is an external pressure. Not everybody dealing with the same external pressure responds the same way. Some of us do because we have internal stressors. And when the external pressure and the internal stress interact, and if it becomes toxic, then we are in danger. And that's what today is about. How do we navigate How do we manage these external pressures? How can we draw upon our inner strengths, our dharmic wisdoms, whether it's counseling, whether it's the Upanishads, whether it's the Puranas? I've kind of immersed myself in all of these things for several years. To me, I don't see a difference except the timeline. I know the heritage that I was given, and I know the heritage, the counseling, and the mental health discipline that I have learned and I teach. I see them as different points in the same continuum. They're all getting to the same place of how can we help people not be distressed. So, understanding this concept of stress and pressures, I want to kind of stop sharing and I want to ask you to the extent you feel comfortable sharing. If you take on the perspective of social pressures, what is your social pressure? What are the things external? Don't go internal yet. What are the things that are weighing on you, that are pushing down on you socially? What are some things that's pressuring you? Speak out or chat to the extent you can. Yep. I'm receiving some private messages too. Yep. Desire to be better, desire to be productive, fear for wellness, COVID. Yep. Family. Oh, yeah, I know. It's a big one, right, Jennifer? Family's expectations. Shreya, fear of losing my loved ones. Now, as you see here, you will automatically realize some are external pressures, some are internal pressures. I'm receiving some private messages too. So when you see the pressure to be productive, is that external or internal? That's something for you to think about. The desire to be worthy, is that external? Is it internal? Fear around COVID. You'll see the way that stressors are articulated. You see right away it's a mix of external and internal. And therein lies one of our challenges. So if you look at social pressures, there's a tremendous pressure to conform. Is it external? Is it internal? There are school-related pressures, family-related pressures, work, college, friends, all of those pressures. What are the internal pressures? Not belonging, feeling left out, rejected, not popular enough, not good enough, can't keep up, just feeling overwhelmed. I can't do this. I don't care. I just want to give up. Then getting anxious. There's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me that I can't do it? Everybody else can do it. Feeling dejected, like something is wrong with you. And all these various pressures externally that compound what we feel internally. Yep. Imposter syndrome, fear. Yep. You see the pattern that we are creating here. So this is very real. It's not made up because external pressures will continue to exist. And internally, if we have soft spots where we feel scared or we feel anxious or depressed, that soft spot allows the external pressure to kind of intrude and affect ours internally. So where do we go to our dharmic messages? Pick the story of Karna, abandoned by his mother, didn't know who his father was, called names. Society wouldn't accept him for no fault of his. Wanted a friend, wanted to belong, wanted to know that he too mattered. Duryodhana was a beautiful person in that aspect. Karna was one of the most generous people, even gave the shield of his body, even when he realized to his detriment that was going to be. Why am I bringing this up? As you are dealing with emotions of feeling left out, rejected, while you're attracted to these goodness, you see, Karna did something that cost him his path to moksha. He didn't follow the path of Dharma. In his desire to be sure that he made his friend feel that he was loyal, is it possible that Karna overlooked Dharma of what he might have known as a right answer? And we have instances later on in the Mahabharata where Krishna confronts him and Karna acknowledges it and yet says, I cannot betray my friend because I know what betrayal feels like. Clearly, I'm paraphrasing. What does that dharmic message tell us? That these feelings are understandable, may even be common. But as you are going through these feelings, never forget the path of dharma and moksha. Just in order to cater to your temporary feelings of rejection and not belonging, not being good enough, try not to give in to ways that are not dharmic. Is there a story that actually gives us the other way? Sita Devi. Just to make sure we cover genders too. She was a queen. She married a prince thinking she was going to be a queen. Her husband forsake or went away into the jungle forest for many years to keep up his father's promise. She lived away from him longer than she lived with him. Kidnapped, taken away by Ravana into Lanka, suffered, and then being asked to prove her chastity, the Agni Pariksha. Talk about feeling wronged. Talk about feeling, even though she loved her husband and believed her husband loved her life was still very, very difficult. And yet, she didn't swerve from the path of Dharma. She raised her two boys to be fitting rulers of Ayodhya. So this is a way for you to go after everything you want, not be tempted by a temporary feeling of rejection and unworthiness and not really fitting in, viewing them as these are tests for me to see, do I know what my dharma is? Do I know what the right path is? How do you find that right path? As we go into other scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, they talk to us about how we can discern. What is a path of discernment? Stepping to another kind of stress, emotional, relational stress. Here again, I ask you, sometimes taking care of ourselves feels selfish. We feel like, how can I possibly say no to this person who wants something from me? And go and say, I gotta meditate, or I need to go take a hot bath, or this is my downtime. I don't have the time for another appointment. How do we remember to carve out time for the most precious commodity in the world, self? And does that feel selfish? Does that feel like we should not do that? I know I struggled with it for many, many years before I gave myself permission to do that. And sometimes that is exactly what self-care is. Prioritizing yourself so you don't feel depleted and frustrated and misused and worn out and all of that stuff. We have the Bhagavad Gita, which says, you have to uplift yourself. Yourself is the only thing you have, your friend. You have to do that. What happens when we don't do that? We go into the Devi Mahatmya, this fierce picture of the goddess fighting and killing demons. You see, the demons are internal demons, they're not outside. They are your emotions of anger and jealousy and, passion that's completely unbridled, arrogance, all of those emotions that we can start feeling when we don't respect ourselves, When we don't take care of ourselves, one of the problems that comes up is all these emotions. And Devi talks about how do you control those emotions? How do you discern? How do you trample on them? Almost be fierce against them. So you see, wherever we look at, whichever dharmic path we look at, when we look at spiritual wellness, comes to the same thing. How do you get beyond suffering and sadness and pain and depression? All of those not so fun things. How do we go towards liberation? The paths are many. You can use knowledge, devotion, by the way you behave, prayer, worship, and you can have core values, nonviolence, honesty, kindness, depending on the darshana that you choose. The path is slightly different, but this is the commonality you'll see in all of the dharmic approaches, whether it's Jainism, Buddhism, whether you see it's yoga, whether you see it's Hinduism, and in Hinduism, whichever approach, whichever Vedantic approach or non-Vedantic approach you have. This is the crux of it. There's not much of a difference between philosophy and psychology. They both deal with getting over suffering. So going into the path, so where does that leave you? Now that we've looked at, you can't quite splice one part of the self away from the other. It's all integrated. You can't just say, I'm going to make my little finger feel well. It's a part of your entire body. The Bhagavad Gita is the beautiful story. The Gita, the Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, is not external, it's internal. When we know what we ought to do, what the right thing to do, and yet we don't want to do it, it's so much easier to do something else. That struggle that we have was Arjuna's struggle. He looked at all of his relatives. He knew what the right thing was, what dharma was. He couldn't do it. You may all know that I don't want to be friends with this person. I don't want to be engaging in this behavior that is detrimental to me. I know what I should do, but we're human. We're not able to practice the dharma that we see. So what does the Gita tell us? It doesn't tell us any one thing definitively. It tells you there are 4 ways you can get over yourself. Use knowledge. So you use knowledge in service of others. Tells you bhakti. Pray, devote yourself, worship, love others, compassion. Tells you karma, selfless service. But to do any of that, you need some meditation, dhyana yoga. You need to get beyond your yoga, beyond your ego, and your own intellect and your own intuitive, sometimes misguidance. Where does it say that? It says it all over the place. This is karma yoga. What is karma yoga? It's the action without any attachment to personal rewards. That sounds very esoteric. How can you do it in your life? We do it all the time. The priest in the temple, the chaplain in your universities, they may draw a salary, but their service is all towards others. The priest who's praying at the temple, he's not praying for himself. He's praying for all of you. The astronomers, Aryabhatas. Why did they go into astronomy? Why did they develop all these things? So that people could predict when they could sow their crops, when they could harvest their seasons, when is their light strongest, when is it that the moon is there fully. You have Shishruta, Charaka. Why did they do surgery? Why did they find out father of surgery, Shishruta? So that they could serve and ease other people's suffering. So karma yoga is using whatever your skill set is, whatever you've studied. Also serve yourself. Nobody says don't make money. Yes, go after artha, go after kama. But remember a little piece of dharma so that others benefit by virtue of your skill set. What else does the Bhagavad Gita say? Bhakti yoga. Protect love, devotion, adoration. It's not only to God or what you believe is divinity. It's to everybody around you. How do you practice? And of course, there's a very popular sentence, a verse in Bhagavad Gita, Paritranaya Sadhunam. You would have heard it. If not anywhere, anytime you play the Mahabharata on YouTube. How do you practice Bhakti Yoga? a mom taking care of a child, a friend, Sudama and Krishna, devotional. That's that outpouring of compassion to serve another. What does loving someone get for you? You feel good, but that's not the reason we love. We love because we can't help ourselves, but do it along the guidance of Dharma, not just when your selfish interests are fulfilled. Bhagavad Gita talks about the Jnana Yoga, the path, and depending on which Vedantic school you might believe in, the interpretations can change. But pursuing knowledge, understanding knowledge is the absolute in many darshanas. And that is a powerful way of practicing. How is Jnana Yoga practiced in your life? Use your knowledge to serve others. Teach. Practice your medicine. If you are in the world of finance, no harm, go make money. But also don't forget to take care of the person who cannot take care of themselves. Use your knowledge to serve others. And of course, the last path of yoga, which is Dhyana Yoga. And my computer decides to freeze. So I'm going to keep talking. When it comes back, we'll move forward. So Dhyana Yoga, which is the path of meditation. And the Bhagavad Gita says the yogi is superior to the ascetic, to the jnani, and even to the karmic. But again, Bhagavad Gita will say this different things about different yogas at different parts of it. It doesn't take a definitive stand on which is the best yoga to do. And how would you do Dhyana Yoga? Of course, yoga, meditation is one way to do it. So depending on what your particular aptitude is, follow that. Follow your karma. Go and acquire the arthas that you want. Just remember to live dharmically. The Yoga Sutra, of course, helps us understand the concept, the purpose of yoga is chittavritti nirodha, so that the mind is quiet. Why should the mind be quiet? So that you can get beyond yourself. You can think about others, not be bound by your ego and all of our human nonsense we have going on in us, all of our emotions. It's so hard to be a human being. So these are practices you need, because for a very long time to come, we are going to be in a human body. I don't think we've mutated enough so far. So we have to work with the body we have and say, how do I practice the skills to discern? Yoga, Jainism agrees to a large part to this. Buddhism does. Again, many aspects of Hinduism will talk about yoga, like we talked about the Bhagavad Gita. How do you follow the ethical do's and don'ts? Ahimsa, sensitivity to all living things, non-injury. Be as honest as you can. Don't be greedy. Use, whether it's your carbon footprint in the environment, don't take up more space than is yours. Pursue. Don't be greedy. Share. And when you do something wrong, as you will frequently do, perhaps on a daily basis, introspect. What is it that triggered me? Why did I do that? How can I get better? And when nothing makes sense, Ishvara Pranidhana. Surrender and says, I don't know how to make sense of this. Help me. And that's a few things that I thought we can share in terms of what does our Dharma tell us about self-care. So before we move in to a very short meditation relaxation, I'm seeing the chat. Yep. No is a complete sentence. Yep. I'm seeing this. Yes. So how do you take all of this information that I just kind of fire hosed on you? And I will send the presentation so you can refer to it. What do you do with it? One thing you can do with it is to discern which is your kind of yoga. Is it jnana, using your knowledge to help others? Is it karma, just helping others selflessly? Is it bhakti, loving devotion? Is it dhyana, meditation? And even as I say it, you may be realizing, well, you can't do one without the other. When I am practicing manana, I am doing karma. It is bound by bhakti. And I am meditating. So you'll very soon realize it is integrated. It's just one leads the other. My way has been I use whatever learning finds me and I share it in forums like this. People listen and teach me. And the other way is meditation. So if you would like, we can do it now or in 10 minutes. Just go through a small cycle of meditation. And remember, we all have a very innate ability to meditate. There isn't anyone who doesn't know how to meditate. You just don't know you do it. So I can take questions now and then wrap up with meditation. I'll go into meditation now. Vineet, what would you suggest?
Thank you, Aparna. I think perhaps we can hold some space for some questions, some clarifications, some shares and reflections. And then I feel like, closing with the meditation might be a nice way of kind of grounding us and allowing us to figuratively and literally sit with everything that you've given us. Is that okay?
Absolutely. So I know there were some questions. Did any catch your eye, Vineet, that you would like me to kind of address?
So there were just a lot of appreciations. I'm going through the chat box now. So there was a question that was privately messaged to me, and the questioner, I think, wants to remain anonymous. So I'll just actually there were two, and I'll kind of conflate them into one for the sake of time. But essentially, just asking for some clarification on the various practices that you described, and then kind of specifically the four paths of yoga that are articulated in the Gita. Sometimes it seems like these paths are about what we do for others. How do we connect this back to the topic of self-care? I'm a little confused about the relationship between service to others and self-care.
Very, very good question. Thank you for asking that. Our Dharmic traditions are very clear that the self does not exist without a relationship to others, that we experience who we are in relationship to our interaction with others. So when we privilege and emphasize who we are to others, through that interaction, we know ourselves. We may think I'm kind, is evidenced by what? What do you do for others? How does the world know you're kind? In what way do you impact others? That's the Dharmic answer. From a counseling perspective, that gives us the purpose and meaning that we're looking for in life. The most important human need is a sense of love, belonging. And if we find a reason for something, we will pretty much be able to tolerate anything. We oftentimes don't see the point of it. So when we are in those interactions of giving to others, we don't realize we're actually receiving. And what we are receiving is feedback that we matter. We have a purpose. We have a meaning for what our existence. So that's the existential reason why I think I would speculate our dharmas focus on it. I know Ashaji and Viniji may have different answers to that too.
Thank you, Aparna. I'm going to ask a follow-up question that was messaged to me, and that is, what do we do in cases where, especially as caregivers, or those whose work involves direct service to others, where we start feeling that burnout in serving others rather than, as you just so eloquently stated, that sense of purpose?
That's when, remember, one of the tops talks about prioritizing yourself. So it's a balancing act. You can't do one to the detriment of other. So you can't give all the time without privileging yourself. So when you don't take care of yourself, You feel the burnout. Now, that's the discernment. At what point is it excessive to just take care of ourselves? And at what point is it too much to just be outward facing? It's where it comes into the motivation. Are you giving others because you feel nobody else can? That you are the only person who can give? In which case, ego may need to get checked. Are you giving to others because they have a need and you just feel guilty that if you don't give, they will suffer? There again, it's ego because the world is more than you and me. Somebody will come in to take care of that person. So, this is where the discernment comes. It's not an answer to be found in a book, it's an answer that is discerned. Is this mine to do? Just because there's a world full of problems, don't automatically assume that it's yours to do. And we get into a different theory here, the karma theory that comes in there. But not everything that needs doing is yours to do. And that process of discernment has been how I have intuited what do I need to do and what do I not need to do. And others may have more insight here too.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And it very much evokes this principle of humility, of recognizing that I have a part to play, but that there is so much more beyond me. And of course, from a devotional standpoint, we can say that, there is a divine who is in control and I'm an instrument, or we might talk about kind of a universe that is greater than all of us and at work, but just recognizing both our part to play, but also the largeness of the world beyond us. So thank you so much. I see Zachary has a question, so I'm going to invite Zachary to go ahead and unmute themselves and ask that question. Before that, though, a practical request that came about in the chat box, and a couple of people private messaged me as well, a request for today's presentation. Yes. So perhaps, Aparnaji, if it's okay, if we can share, perhaps you can just type into the chat box an email address that folks can write to you, and then you can reply if you're comfortable with the PowerPoint. That might
Absolutely.
be the best way of doing it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Zachary, if you're ready with your question.
Ooh, thanks. I appreciate the presentation. I joined a little bit late, but what I was able to hear was really great and helpful. I was wondering, I just have thoughts about disappointment generally, and especially like disappointment in relationship and in all types of relationship, but sort of how to navigate that within the Dharma. I feel like it's that balance between self-care and caring for others. Oftentimes it's hard to find that homeostasis, and especially when you're interacting with folks who maybe haven't found balance themselves, right? And so how do you not allow that sort of disappointment to knock you off of balance in the pursuit of finding some sort of inner peace?
Right. You can't allow anyone to drain your energy. That's one of the selves, right? We have to protect the most precious thing you have is yourselves. And you can't allow anyone to drain you of that. Some Dharmic traditions will say, Aham Brahmasmi, I am that Brahman. If you are someone who believes that, you have to treat that part of you as if it is divinity. It is your sacred duty to protect all parts of yourself. Why? So you can serve and do what it is you're meant to do. So you don't give away your energy to those that might grab. They may have a need for your love. They may have a need to be taken care of by you. They may have a desire to be tended by you. Doesn't make it yours to do it. And if you do it because of your own personal motivations, you want to feel needed, you want to feel loved, that is the price those are the human baggages we carry. And that's what life is about. As we make mistakes enough number of times, we learn to let go of those things. Now, you can do it in the Dharmic approaches of discernment and meditation. You can also seek mental health help so that they also help you diffuse that. What is the reason you're tied into those abusive patterns? Why are you feeling there's a need, self-worth, self-esteem? Those are the buzzwords that come in. So clearly, as I was sharing with Vinici, this is not a one-time presentation. This is like a teaser where I expect I'll leave you with more questions than anything. So hopefully we will be able to continue the dialogue. I hope that answers a little bit, Zachary, what you're asking.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna. Just going back to the chat box, I see a question from Harsh, and Harsh is asking, oftentimes we can convince ourselves that whatever path we are on serves a benevolent purpose, even though in actuality it may be doing the opposite, right? So we kind of delude ourselves into thinking we're serving a benevolent, noble purpose, and we might be doing the opposite. How can we be more truthful to ourselves? How do we get a more objective view of the goodness of our actions rather than just depending on kind of our own conception of, our benevolent, noble, praiseworthy purpose?
Mm-hmm. That's a very complicated but a beautiful question, Harsh. There's not one easy way. If you are looking for objective answer, it lies in the subjective discernment. If you're looking for responses from people who benefited from it, that is very subjective. If you're looking for, like, let's say you've done something, you've raised money to feed a certain group of people who don't have food that particular day. One objective measure is they ate that day. But did it really serve their need, or does it serve your need to feel like I helped someone? That process is discernment. That's a question for you to discern with yourself. And I believe that you do know the truth. The very fact you are able to say that maybe not everything I do is actually as great as it really is, suggests to me that there is a part of you, the witness part of you, that does discern it. And the answer is to be able to find that space where you can't lead yourself astray with your own rationalizations or be pressured by others in what you're doing is right. The answer is within, and there may be teachers who can guide you and validate that. But the answer is within, Harsh.
Wonderful answer. Thank you so much. I love this emphasis on discernment. And it's not something that we often think about, perhaps in relation to self-care, but your presentation really, one of the big takeaways for me and kind of insights that I'm carrying with me is this very subtle but super powerful and critical relationship between self-care and discernment.
Right. Very well said. That's the crux of it. When you are connected within yourself, with all yourselves, I'm not talking multiple personalities, with all yourselves, and you're connected with others, your friends, your community, and if you so believe, with the Supreme Self, if divinity and God is one of your beliefs. When you are connected, even if things are difficult, even if it's dysfunctional, it somehow makes it bearable. If you have a why, this is kind of one of the sayings they found out when even in the most austere circumstances, if a human being has a reason why, they can pretty much tolerate any what. Because it gives them a sense of meaning and purpose. And that meaning and purpose emerges when you feel connected. In love with yourself, with others, and for all that surrounds you.
So powerful. So powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So we've talked about you said, when you have a why, you can tolerate just about any what. I want to go from the why to the what to the how. And I think maybe this can be the closing question before, for those who can stay. I know we're approaching the hour mark. For those who can stay, we'll close with a brief meditation, if that's all right with you, Aparna. But before that, I'd like maybe the final question to be Ajay's, which is in the chat box. And Ajay asks, how best to take the first steps to self-care? So a very practical question. What are
Simple.
some practical suggestions about what to do
Right.
first?
It's as simple as your breath. The stress response is hardwired. You don't need to do anything to protect yourself. You will freeze, flee, fly. You will know that right away. The relaxation response is not. It's deliberate. It's triggered by the parasympathetic nervous system. What flips that switch is 90 seconds of breath awareness. If you can get 2 minutes of breath awareness here and there throughout your days, cumulatively, you are resetting, relaxing, caring for all aspects of yourself, because your breath is what connects you. Remember one of our earliest slides? The breath is the way to vitalize all parts of you. So your first step will be breath awareness. Let's go into that. I wasn't planning that as meditation. That's as good as any meditation. Let's try that. So sit back. If you're eating something, finish chewing, swallow. If you're saying something, finish up your sentence. Just settle into something that feels comfortable. Recognize you live in a space, your body, your mind. Don't worry about shutting down your thoughts. It's kind of like the bubble factory. The brain does what it does. It blows bubbles, it blows thoughts. You don't have to keep popping it. Just as you would watch a child blowing bubbles, let your brain do its thing. Let it do its thoughts. You simply shift your attention to the air that comes in and out of you. You can track it as it enters your nose, or maybe as it goes into your throat, or when it goes into your chest and body, or the way back. It is not very important where you focus. Just take in the breath, take in as much as you want. Remember to give back. You have to give back at least as much as you take. Beautiful lesson the breath tells us. And as you take in and goes out, just give your body permission to let go. We tend to carry the world on our shoulders. Just let the body let go. It's take in, give back. And in those 60 seconds, your body is flipped the parasympathetic nervous system, which switches the relaxation response. That's a practical first step. You can do it in the middle of a meeting. You can do it at the light. You can do it when you're waiting for the commercials to change on the TV. Just about anywhere. If you are someone who likes chants and music, and you're not in a place where you can do anything, just play a chant in the background. I'm going to play something for just a minute. You can sit by the window, watch a video of something beautiful. I am mesmerized by the ocean. 90 seconds resets your brain. Take a breath in.
In 2 weeks. If you are struggling to lose
So, whatever your day allows you to do, 2 minutes of breath awareness, immersing yourself in a beautiful picture surrounding for a couple of minutes, listening to some music, chant for a couple of minutes, sneak away those 1 or 2 minutes. Makes a tremendous difference, and it's cumulative, it adds up. And hopefully we'll be able to do more of these, so you build up a repertoire of how do we practice self-care, how do we remember to practice. Thank you for being with me today, and I hand it over back to Vineet.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramaswamy, Aparna ji. You've given us so much to think about, but perhaps even more importantly, you've filled our cup a little bit this evening on so many levels, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You've given us much to think about, but you've also given us much to reflect on and sit with. As Barnaji said, in some ways we are piloting some ideas, and so please stay tuned, particularly if you are joining us as part of the Princeton or Yale communities, either as students or alum, staff, faculty, or members of the broader community. We are hoping to have some more opportunities to engage with some of these wisdom teachings, and also to engage with that practical dimension, to sit in meditation together. And if Dr. Ramaswamy's schedule allows, and if we can kind of, align the stars, so to speak, we would love to continue to draw from her wealth of knowledge and experience, and we'll ask her to guide some meditations and hold some space for us. I believe Dr. Ramaswamy has shared an email address in the chat box. I'm going to make sure, if you haven't already done so, please do go ahead before we close out the Zoom session and make sure you jot down that email address if you are interested in keeping in touch and in receiving a copy of the PowerPoint from this evening's presentation. On behalf of the Hindu Life program at Princeton University, and I know I speak on behalf of my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Shipman, on behalf of the Hindu Life program at Yale University and Dharma into Action. We're so grateful to all of you for joining us, for being a part of this gathering, this sharing of reflection, of wisdom, of movement through ideas around self-care into practical steps towards caring for ourselves and effectively caring for one another. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Namaste.